Atlanta News First Plus starts now.
In September of 2024, a fire at the BioLab pool chemical manufacturing facility in Conyers produced a large chemical plume that drifted across parts of metro Atlanta, triggering public safety concerns and a prolonged cleanup effort. Thanks for joining us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Maria Moreau. Now, roughly 17,000 people near that facility had to be evacuated. More than 70,000 others were ordered to shelter in place for several days. Atlanta News First, Sarah Hammond looks back on where we were when we saw this massive chemical plume take over the Conyers area.
This fire also prompted lawsuits, health studies, and BioLab's partial closure here in Conyers. Federal officials say the fire started when chemicals stored in the warehouse came in contact with water, causing this plume of smoke to fill the sky. Several lawsuits were filed against BioLab, including one brought by Rockdale County. In April, OSHA cited BioLab for 6 violations and hit them with a $61,000 fine. And earlier this year, the Morehouse School of Medicine launched a 3-year study to look at the impacts of the potentially toxic fumes on the community here. And in May, BioLab decided to close the manufacturing branch of its Conyers facility after they were met with strong reactions from the community.
You often think, should that type of plant be in the middle of a city like that? Should it have been outside in the outskirts or something like that?
This was not the first fire reported here at the facility. There was one in 2004 and in 2020. This fire had many in the community asking why it was built so close to where they live and work every day. In Conyers, Sarah Hammond for Atlanta News First.
And today, the Georgia Supreme Court heard arguments tied to that 2024 BioLab fire, asking whether people exposed to toxic chemicals, even those without a current diagnosed injury, could seek court-ordered medical monitoring. Now, the justices weighing if Georgia law allows that kind of relief, and if so, what the plaintiffs will need to do to prove that. And joining me now is senior reporter Patrick Quinn. Patrick, you were listening in on court this morning. Talk to me about really what is being laid out in this push to get these victims long-term monitoring.
Maria, this case is really interesting because it has implications that could potentially go much further than just this BioLab incident. But let's break it down. Both sides were in court here in downtown Atlanta today. No ruling today. The earliest we could potentially see a ruling, according to some of the attorneys, is July. But the heart of the issue is whether, like you mentioned, if those who live in the Conyers area, if they don't currently show any real signs, visible signs of any harm or injury, could they qualify for potential screenings to detect if they could have future implications from this chemical fire that existed September 2024. And right now, there is no state law that says one way or the other. So that's why this case had to come before the state Supreme Court to have these judges rule, again, if these victims could qualify for any potential health monitoring to see if they do have any future issues. A really interesting back and forth case here that we heard inside. The judges will certainly have a lot to consider before they make a ruling on this case. But as they weigh this ruling, a civil class action lawsuit is already underway, and the attorney said that will continue to proceed through the courts while the state Supreme Court, they monitor this issue of, again, should these victims be awarded any potential health monitoring, screenings, potentially for cancer or lung issues or any other issues that would be covered by BioLab. Does that make sense, Maria?
Yeah, I'm following, Patrick. And like you mentioned, there was a lot of back and forth. This decision could take months to figure out. Were there any moments from either the attorneys or these justices that stood out to you?
I think one of the biggest questions that stood out is how many people are we talking about? One attorney representing BioLab speculated that there could be potentially upwards of 2 million people who could potentially qualify for health monitoring that BioLab would be on the hook for. 2 million people, they're arguing, in the vicinity of Conyers and Rockdale County that maybe potentially could have been impacted by these plumes. I talked with the attorneys actually representing some of the the victims in this case, and they said, it's too early to tell how many people could qualify. We actually think it's going to be in the tens of thousands, so still a lot of people, but that's something that will have to be decided. It's really important to stress here that the state Supreme Court, they're not going to actually rule if all of these potential victims qualify for health monitoring. They're going to just give the lower courts the ability to have victims potentially qualify for health monitoring. It's something that it's somewhat in the weeds, but the state Supreme Court's not going to rule if Jane Doe or John Doe, if they'll actually get the monitoring. All of these victims, they're going to have to go through a very specific qualification process to actually determine if they'll have any of the screenings covered. It's gonna be based on the tenure of time, some of the potential parameters at least, or how close they were to the fire, how long they've been experiencing any issues, if this is something that just their primary care physician could monitor, or if they need specific consultation. There's going to be a lot of hoops that they're going to have to jump through before they actually get any of these screenings covered. You can understand how the cost of this could quickly increase for BioLab if indeed they do have to cover upwards of 2 million people or even tens of thousands of people, and what screenings they have to cover. And like I mentioned, this could go beyond BioLab. This could have implications for not just future potential chemical plant spills or any sort of fires of that nature, but also just coverage of other incidents at large. Maria?
Yeah, and I'm just showing people that chemical plume that we saw that could be seen for miles and miles, even in neighboring communities, prompting concerns among residents. I know you're not an attorney, Patrick, but in talking with the judges, not the judges, but the attorneys that were present, what is their course of action or their plan if the justices don't rule in the favor of getting clarity about whether these residents who don't currently have injuries or presenting symptoms that could be directly tied to the BioLab chemical spill, what course of action is available to them on making sure that they're looking out for their health for future potential hazards they could face?
That was something that the attorneys really stressed, Maria, talking with them on the steps of the state Supreme Court here just moments ago. They stressed that we are fighting for Georgians, and it's not just Georgians in this necessarily specific case, but Georgians at large for any future incidences that may happen. But they did stress that this is somewhat of a side case to the case that's already ongoing, the class action lawsuits, and there are many cases against BioLab going on right now about damage to homes, certainly health implications. So there's a lot of fallout going on in terms of this BioLab fire from September 2024. But they said that those cases will continue. It just might tighten the parameters of those cases should the state Supreme Court not rule in a way that would guarantee health monitoring. So those cases will continue, but just kind of the depth, the reach, the scope of who may be impacted, and certainly who may see any coverage, health coverage, certainly any potential impacts of the chemical spill and the fire. So it may just tighten the parameters there, but they stress, no, this is not going to stop those cases. This is not going to impede any of the cases that are currently going on. It's just adding to this overall legal fight that is robust and it is widespread.
We're talking with Atlanta News First senior reporter Patrick Quinn. Now you can watch the full hearing that we streamed for you on Atlanta News First Plus. We have that available for you on demand on our streaming channels, and you can go to Atlanta News First YouTube under the live section to watch the full hearing. Patrick, I know you've got a report coming up for us here in the evening hours for Atlanta News First, and there's still a lot of questions to be answered. I just want to thank you for hopping on with us as we continue our coverage.